let's not worship at the shrine here. Aristotle has some things to say that are not very helpful. I've already suggested that he seems to have at times a sort of anti-business bias. For example, he thinks it's evil to charge interest, and not alone in that respect. In fact, the Greek word for interest is also the Greek word for bastard, and I don't think that's a coincidence. Beyond that, however, though you can still adapt his work, as I suggested before, thinking of organizations as communities. Beyond that, though, Aristotle is parochial, and he is upper class. I don't think there's much in Aristotle. I don't think there's anything in Aristotle that gives you much of a clue about how to deal with other cultures, for example. I don't think you would read Aristotle to get some idea about how to deal with ethical issues in multinational business. Aristotle, I think, thinks that a virtuous person is a rich Athenian gentleman, okay? And as I suggested before, he doesn't have such a high opinion of women and farmers and businessmen and so on. And I think we can do without that. And in general, by the way, I think that when we're talking about the great figures in philosophy, and for that matter, the great figures in anything, we need to be aware that nobody gets everything right. And nobody does everything right. Nobody is truly a saint, and nobody has got all the truth. And that's certainly true of Aristotle. So we want to avoid his snobbery. One of the differences, there are many differences, as I suggested earlier, between Aristotle and Socrates. But here's one difference. Aristotle thinks ethics is, as I said before, not like geometry, and becoming ethical isn't like sort of learning a set of rules. It isn't theoretical knowledge. It's practical, but theoretical too, but it's always practical. It's always somehow imprecise. You have to be creative about it and so on. And what that suggests is that ethics has a lot to do with your upbringing. You're responsible for your character, even though it's influenced by your family and your society. But it's your character, finally, and you're responsible for it. Whereas Socrates believes that if you know what, say, courage is, then you'll find it so attractive that you'll be courageous. That sounds a little implausible, but the downside of it, the Aristotelian view, is, people who are brought up in the wrong kind of conditions, people who aren't like us, will never quite make it. They'll never really quite be virtuous. Whereas Socrates says, look, a woman can be courageous, a slave can be courageous. Yes, a soldier can be courageous, sure. But so can a little child. So can an ordinary person. There's something democratic about that, even though I'm not sure it makes sense as an analysis of what courage is about. Something democratic about that, in contrast to Aristotle's sort of upper middle class snobbery, which is not particularly attractive. But hey, nobody's perfect.